The Hells Angels biker followed the little girl into a cracked garage room, and what she found beneath the tiles changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's incredible story. On a quiet, cold evening, a Hells Angels biker named Jake, known for his tough exterior and an unforgiving past, found himself riding through the winding streets of a sleepy town. His Harley-Davidson roared through the darkness, cutting through the thick fog that had settled over the town. He had been riding for hours, the chill in the air biting through his leather jacket, and the only company was the rhythmic hum of the engine beneath him. As he made his way down a narrow road lined with old, weathered houses, a faint sound reached his ears. It was a soft cry, almost inaudible over the growl of the motorcycle. Jake's first instinct was to keep going. In his line of work, stopping for anything or anyone was a luxury he couldn't afford. But something about the sound tugged at him, pulling him toward it. Slowing his bike, he listened more carefully. The cry grew louder, a child's voice, desperate and full of fear. Without thinking, Jake steered his bike toward the source of the sound, his mind already working through the possibilities. When he reached a small, dilapidated house on the corner, the door was slightly ajar. The crying was coming from inside. He dismounted, his boots thudding against the pavement as he approached the house. His hand instinctively went to the handle of his knife, but he paused, sensing no immediate threat. He stepped inside, the creaky floorboards protesting under his weight. That's when he saw her, a little girl, no older than 8, sitting on the floor in the corner of the room. Her clothes were torn, and she looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Please, help me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He was used to dealing with danger, but seeing a child in such distress hit him harder than he expected. She had clearly been through something terrible, something he couldn't quite understand yet. Without a word, Jake kneeled down beside her. He knew better than to approach too quickly, but there was no mistaking the fear in her eyes. "What happened?" Jake asked softly, his voice gruff, but trying to be gentle. She looked at him, her small body shaking, then pointed toward the back of the house, where a door led to a cracked garage. "There's a secret under the tiles," she murmured, barely audible. Jake didn't waste a second. He helped her to her feet, and they moved toward the back door. The house smelled of mildew and dust, and the once sturdy wooden floors creaked underfoot as they crossed the threshold into the garage. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of a single overhead light that flickered intermittently. The garage was filled with old furniture, boxes, and scattered tools, but it was the cracked floor that caught Jake's attention. The tiles were loose, revealing gaps beneath them. The girl knelt down, her small hands shaking as she tugged at the corner of one tile. Jake crouched beside her, his large hands carefully lifting the tile away. What they found beneath shocked him. A small, rusty metal box sat hidden in the floor, covered in dust and grime. It was old, very old, and the box looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The girl looked at Jake, her eyes wide with fear. It's dangerous," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Jake's instincts told him to walk away, to leave whatever secrets were buried here. But something about the way she said it, the way her eyes begged for him to understand, made him pause. His fingers gripped the metal box, and with one swift motion, he pried it open. What he saw inside changed everything. Jake's fingers tightened around the rusty metal box, the hinges groaning in protest as he pried it open. The garage was eerily silent, the only sound the low hum of the flickering light above. Inside the box were several old photographs, yellowed with age, and a stack of papers that appeared to be documents of some sort. But what caught Jake's eye was the strange, ornate key that lay at the bottom of the box, covered in dust. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a key made of a dark, weathered metal, shaped in an intricate pattern. He held it up, the dim light reflecting off the surface, and for a moment, everything in the room seemed to pause. The girl beside him trembled, her small hand reaching out toward the key, her eyes wide with both fear and fascination. "What is this?" Jake muttered to himself as he turned the key over in his hand. The girl's voice was barely a whisper, as if the very mention of it made her fear it even more. "It's the key to my father's secret," she said softly. Jake's heart skipped a beat. "Your father's secret?" he asked, his voice low and filled with curiosity. The girl nodded, her expression darkening. "He was a part of something dangerous. He tried to protect me from it, but now, it's all coming back." Jake didn't fully understand what she meant, but the weight of her words hung in the air, thick with mystery. The garage seemed even colder now, the shadows stretching longer as Jake stood up, still holding the key. He glanced at the girl, who was watching him intently, as though she were waiting for him to make a decision. Without a word, Jake turned toward the back wall of the garage. There, behind a pile of old crates, was a small door. It was hidden, almost as if someone had tried to keep it secret. The door was old and worn, its wood cracked and faded. Jake moved toward it, the key still in his hand. He felt a strange pull, a sense that whatever lay beyond that door was the answer to something he couldn't yet grasp. As he reached for the door handle, he turned back to the girl. "Are you sure you want to know what's behind it?" he asked, his voice gruff. The girl nodded, her small face resolute. "I have to know. It's the only way I'll understand everything. The truth." Jake hesitated for a moment longer, his hand on the door. Something about the girl's determination made him trust her, even though he barely knew her. He pushed the door open with a creak, revealing a dark staircase leading down into the depths of the house. The air grew colder as they descended, the only light coming from the dim glow above them. At the bottom of the stairs, they found a small room, the walls lined with shelves filled with old books and papers. The room had an unsettling feel to it, as though it had been untouched for years. In the center of the room was a large wooden chest, covered in dust and cobwebs. Jake's heart raced as he approached it, his mind racing with questions. What was inside? What had the girl's father hidden down here all these years? As he knelt beside the chest, the girl's voice echoed in his mind. "It's all connected. Everything. My father, the secret, the key." With a deep breath, Jake reached for the chest's latch and slowly opened it. Inside, he found a collection of old journals, their pages yellowed and fragile. But as he flipped through them, his eyes caught something else, an old map, marked with strange symbols. The map seemed to show a location, a place far from here. Jake's pulse quickened as he examined it closely. This was no ordinary map. It was a map to something much bigger, something that had been hidden for a long time. The girl stepped forward, her eyes wide with recognition as she looked at the map. "That's it," she whispered. "That's the place where it all started. The place my father tried to protect me from." Jake stood up, the map in his hand. He knew that this was just the beginning of something much larger, something that would change everything for both of them. He looked at the girl one last time before turning toward the door. "We need to go? There's no turning back now." The girl nodded, her face set with determination. As they left the room, the weight of the discovery settled in. Whatever was hidden in that place, it was far more than just a secret. It was a legacy, and it was about to change their lives forever. Jake and the girl stood in silence, the weight of the discovery pressing down on them. The map, still clenched tightly in Jake's hand, seemed to hum with a quiet urgency. He could feel it. This was no coincidence, no random find. The secrets hidden within these walls were connected to something much larger, something that had been carefully guarded for years. As they made their way back up the staircase, the girl's face was a mixture of fear and determination. She glanced at Jake, her eyes flickering with unspoken questions. "What now?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake looked at her, his jaw tightening. "We need to figure out where this map leads," he said, his voice steady but tinged with concern. He knew they couldn't just sit on this discovery. The girl's father had left behind a trail, and it was up to them to follow it. As they stepped back into the dimly lit garage, Jake felt a strange chill in the air. Something was off. He could feel eyes on him, even though the garage seemed empty. He brushed the feeling aside, focusing on the task at hand. The girl's father had gone to great lengths to keep this secret buried. The map, the chest, the key, it was all leading to something, but what? They left the garage and walked back toward the main house, the weight of their discovery hanging between them. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced over his shoulder, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. "We'll need to move quickly," Jake said, his voice low. The longer we wait, the more chances there are that someone else will find out about this. The girl nodded, her face serious. I'm ready, she said, though Jake could sense her fear. She had already been through so much. She didn't deserve any of this, but there was no turning back now. They needed to find out the truth, no matter the cost. The next morning, they set off early, the map rolled up tightly in Jake's pocket. The journey ahead would take them to the outskirts of the town, where the map seemed to point. They followed the winding roads, the landscape growing more desolate as they moved farther from the town. The air felt heavy with anticipation, each passing mile pulling them closer to whatever lay ahead. Jake didn't speak much during the drive. He had a lot on his mind, and the silence between them seemed to settle into a comfortable rhythm. The girl sat beside him, her eyes scanning the road ahead, her fingers tapping nervously against the seat. How far is it? She asked, her voice breaking the silence. Jake glanced at the map again. Not far, he replied, his tone reassuring, though he wasn't entirely sure. The map was vague, the markings cryptic, but he trusted it, as strange as it seemed. The road twisted and turned, and before long, they found themselves in a dense forest. The trees loomed tall, their shadows stretching across the path like sentinels. Jake slowed the truck, his eyes scanning the surroundings. There was something eerie about the place. It felt abandoned, forgotten. But Jake could feel the pull of the map, urging him forward. Finally, they reached a clearing, and there, hidden amongst the trees, was an old building. It was dilapidated, its walls covered in ivy and moss, the windows dark and empty. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The girl gasped softly beside him. This is it, she whispered. Jake parked the truck and turned off the engine. He glanced at the girl, who was staring at the building with wide eyes. You sure? He asked. She nodded, her face pale. This is where it all started, she said. They stepped out of the truck, the air growing colder as they approached the building. Jake's instincts were on high alert, but he couldn't let fear control him now. He had to know what was inside. They reached the door, and Jake pushed it open with a creak. The inside was dark, the air thick with dust. The floorboards groaned beneath their feet as they stepped inside, their footsteps echoing through the empty space. As they moved deeper into the building, Jake noticed something strange. There was a faint smell, like old paper and something else, something metallic. The girl led him toward a door at the far end of the room. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle, but she didn't hesitate. She turned the knob and pushed the door open. Inside was a small room, its walls lined with old books and papers. The room was cluttered, as though someone had been in the middle of a project and had left in a hurry. But it wasn't the clutter that caught Jake's attention. It was the chest in the corner of the room. It was large, wooden, and covered in a thick layer of dust. Jake moved toward it, his heart racing. This was it. This was the moment they had been searching for. The girl stood behind him, watching in silence as Jake crouched down and placed his hands on the chest. With a deep breath, he lifted the lid. What he saw inside made his blood run cold. Jake's breath caught in his throat as the chest creaked open. Inside, it was filled with stacks of old documents, yellowed with age. But it wasn't just the papers that caught his attention. At the very bottom of the chest was a thick, leather-bound book, its cover worn and faded. There was something about it, something that felt different from the rest. The girl, standing silently behind him, took a tentative step forward. What is it? She asked, her voice barely audible, as if afraid to break the stillness. Jake didn't answer right away. He reached for the book, his fingers grazing the cover. As soon as he touched it, a strange sensation passed through him, a jolt of electricity that seemed to course through his fingertips. He pulled his hand back for a moment, then carefully opened the book. The pages inside were filled with symbols, drawings, and strange writings, none of which he recognized. It looked like some kind of journal, but the language was unfamiliar, as if it belonged to an ancient civilization. The girl leaned over his shoulder, her breath catching in her throat. My father, she whispered, he was obsessed with this. I never understood why. Jake turned the pages slowly, each one filled with more cryptic symbols, but as he flipped to the last few pages, something caught his eye. There, scrawled across the final page in hurried handwriting, were a series of coordinates. He quickly pulled out the map from his jacket pocket and matched the coordinates to a location near the edge of the state. The girl's eyes widened as she saw the same coordinates on the map. That's where he That's where he told me not to go, she said, her voice trembling. He said it was too dangerous, that if anyone ever found this, it would change everything. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Whatever her father had been protecting, it was far more than just a secret. It was something powerful, something worth hiding from the world. We need to go there, Jake said, his voice firm. The girl hesitated, glancing around the room as if expecting someone to jump out at them. But what if it's too late? What if someone already knows? She asked, her fear obvious in her eyes. Jake stood up, closing the book and tucking it under his arm. We don't have a choice, he said. If we don't go, someone else will. They left the room and made their way back outside. The sun had begun to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dilapidated building. Jake's truck was parked a few yards away, and the girl climbed in without a word. Jake started the engine, and they drove off into the fading light, the map and the book heavy in the air between them. As they drove further from the town, the road seemed to grow darker and more desolate. The trees on either side of the highway stretched tall and thin, like dark sentinels guarding the road. The girl was quiet, her eyes fixed on the map, her mind clearly racing. I never wanted to be a part of this, she muttered after a long silence. All I ever wanted was a normal life. But now it's all I can think about. What's out there, Jake? What's waiting for us? Jake glanced at her, seeing the fear in her eyes. He didn't know how to answer. He wasn't even sure himself. All he knew was that whatever they were about to uncover, it was going to change everything. They drove for what felt like hours, the town long behind them, the landscape opening up to vast fields and open roads. The GPS on Jake's phone guided them, taking them deeper into the heart of nowhere. The coordinates led them to an old farmhouse, weathered and abandoned. The house sat on a patch of land that had clearly been untouched for years. There were no lights, no movement, nothing to indicate that anyone had lived there in decades. Jake stopped the truck a short distance away, his eyes scanning the property. This is it, he said. The girl's face was pale as she looked out the window, her hand clutching the door handle. I don't want to go in there, she whispered. What if we're not supposed to be here? What if it's all a trap? Jake's gaze softened as he looked at her. I know you're scared, he said, but we can't stop now. We've come too far. The girl nodded slowly, her jaw tightening in resolve. Let's do it. Jake got out of the truck and walked toward the farmhouse. The door creaked as he pushed it open, and the two of them stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, the silence deafening. The floorboards groaned beneath their feet as they moved through the house, every room darker and colder than the last. At the back of the house, they found a basement door, its wooden frame covered in layers of dirt and cobwebs. Without a word, Jake pulled the door open and descended into the darkness. The girl followed, her flashlight illuminating the steps ahead. As they reached the bottom, the temperature dropped noticeably, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was vast, with old furniture and boxes scattered around. In the corner of the room, there was a large metal door. It was locked, but Jake could see a faint light coming from underneath. He approached it cautiously, the key still in his pocket. He pulled it out, his hand shaking slightly, and inserted it into the lock. With a turn, the door creaked open, revealing what lay beyond. The door creaked open, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. Jake stepped in first, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air was thick, musty, like something long forgotten. The room was massive, far larger than anything Jake had expected. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw shelves lining the walls, filled with old books, jars of strange substances, and other items that looked like they belonged in a different time. The girl stepped in behind him, her breathing shallow as she scanned the room. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch a dusty old jar, her fingers brushing lightly against the surface. What is all this? She whispered, her voice filled with both awe and fear. Jake didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved toward the far corner of the room, where something caught his eye. There, hidden beneath a pile of old blankets, was a large wooden chest, similar to the one they had found back at the garage. He knelt down and began pulling the blankets away, revealing the chest's intricate carvings, worn by age but still visible. The girl watched him, her face pale, as if she were afraid of what he might uncover next. Do you think it's more of the same? She asked, her voice almost pleading. Jake didn't look up. He just reached for the chest's brass latch and slowly lifted it open. Inside, there was something different. Instead of more old documents or mysterious artifacts, the chest contained a pile of photographs, some framed, others loose. They were all old, faded, but one photograph in particular stood out. It was a picture of a man, older than Jake, but with the same rugged features. His eyes were cold, but there was something familiar about him. "Who is this?" Jake muttered, his eyes scanning the photo. The girl stepped closer, her eyes widening as she saw the photograph. "That's my father," she said softly. "But that can't be him. This was taken years before I was born." Jake turned the photograph over, revealing a note scribbled on the back. The handwriting was messy, rushed, but legible. "The key to everything lies beneath. Find it before they do." The girl took a step back, her face pale as she processed the words. "What does it mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jake didn't know. He had no answers. But something deep inside told him that they were getting closer to uncovering something far bigger than either of them had imagined. He set the photograph down carefully and moved the rest of the items aside. There was something else at the bottom of the chest, something hidden under the clutter. Jake's hand brushed against it, and a chill ran down his spine. It was another key, identical to the one they had found earlier. He picked it up, feeling its weight in his hand. This was no ordinary key. The girl looked at the key, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "What is this? What's going on here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake stood up, holding the key in his hand, his mind racing. The note, the photo, the keys, it was all connected, but how? He felt the weight of the moment, the pressure of the discovery, the responsibility now resting on his shoulders. "We need to find out," he said, his voice steady but filled with determination. He turned and walked toward the far side of the room, where another door stood, partially hidden by a curtain. The girl followed him, her footsteps hesitant but steady. Jake opened the door and stepped into the next room, which was darker than the first. The faint smell of earth and stone filled the air. As he moved deeper into the room, his flashlight illuminated something that took his breath away. Beneath the floor, a large trapdoor was set into the ground, its edges rusted with age. The key in Jake's hand seemed to pulse, as if calling him toward it. He knelt down, the metal latch cold against his fingertips as he slid the key into place. With a deep breath, he turned it. The trapdoor creaked open, revealing a steep staircase that descended into the depths below. The girl hesitated, looking at Jake. "Do we really need to go down there?" she asked, her voice filled with fear. Jake didn't answer immediately. He looked at her, then down at the dark stairs leading into the unknown. They had come this far. There was no turning back now. "We have to know the truth," he said quietly, taking the first step down into the darkness. The girl followed, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the empty space. The air grew colder as they descended, the silence oppressive. When they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a cavernous room, its walls lined with stone. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on top of it was a small box. It was the size of a shoe box, but made of gold. The box seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Jake stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. As he reached for the box, the girl stopped him. "Do you think it's safe?" she asked, her voice trembling with doubt. Jake paused, his hand hovering over the box. He didn't know, but whatever was inside, it was the key to everything. With a steadying breath, he lifted the lid. The box creaked open with a faint, almost imperceptible sound. Jake and the girl stood frozen, the faint glow from the box illuminating their faces in the darkness of the cavernous room. Inside, it wasn't gold or treasure that they found, but something far more unsettling. A small device, old yet well-maintained, rested in the center of the box. It was no larger than a coffee mug, with strange markings etched into its surface. The markings were symbols, identical to those in the journal they had found earlier. Jake's eyes narrowed as he carefully lifted the device, feeling the cool metal beneath his fingers. "What is this?" the girl whispered, her voice trembling. "What do you think it means?" Jake didn't answer right away. His mind raced, trying to piece everything together. The map, the keys, the journal, and now this device. It was all connected, but to what? The girl took a hesitant step forward, her eyes glued to the device in Jake's hand. "My father never spoke about this. He never mentioned anything like it," she said, her voice low. It's like he was trying to protect me from all of this. But now, she trailed off, her words hanging in the air. Jake stared at the device, turning it over in his hands. He could feel a strange pull, like the device was somehow alive, calling to him. Without thinking, he pressed a small button on the side. The device clicked and hummed to life, its surface lighting up in a soft, eerie glow. A low whirring sound filled the room, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, a holographic image projected from the device, casting strange, shimmering lights across the walls of the underground chamber. The image was blurry at first, but as it came into focus, Jake and the girl saw a map, different from the one they had been following, but still unmistakably familiar. It showed a location far to the north, deep in the mountains, marked with the same strange symbols they had seen earlier. This is it, the girl whispered. This is where my father wanted me to go. But why? Why would he leave this for me? Jake stepped closer to the projection, his mind racing. The map was no coincidence. It was pointing them towards something hidden away in the mountains. He turned to the girl, his face grim. We have to go there. It's the only way to understand what's happening. She nodded slowly, her face pale but determined. I know, she said. But what if we're not ready? What if we're walking right into something we can't get out of? Jake didn't have an answer for her. He didn't know what they were walking into, but there was no turning back now. He had to know the truth. They had come this far, and whatever was hidden in those mountains could change everything. With a deep breath, he took the device and slid it back into the box. Let's go, he said. The two of them left the chamber, the soft hum of the device still echoing in the room behind them. As they climbed back up the stairs and into the main part of the building, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The air seemed thicker now, heavier, as if the very walls were closing in on them. The girl walked beside him, her gaze fixed on the floor, lost in thought. They made their way back to the truck, the heavy weight of the device and the map hanging over them. As they drove away from the abandoned building, Jake's mind raced. The journey ahead would take them into the heart of the mountains, a place he had never been. He had heard rumors, stories of people who had gone missing, but he never put much stock in them. Until now. What if the stories were true? What if whatever they were searching for had already claimed others? The girl broke the silence. Jake, she said softly, what if we're not supposed to find this? What if we're not meant to know the truth? Jake glanced at her, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. I don't know, he admitted. But we're already in this. And we can't stop now. The truck rumbled along the winding roads, the landscape growing more rugged and desolate with each passing mile. The further they went, the more Jake felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. There was no turning back. The map, the device, the strange symbols, it was all leading them towards something, and they couldn't ignore it. Hours passed, and the night grew colder. They reached the base of the mountains just before dawn, the sky lightening with the first hints of morning. Jake parked the truck at the foot of a narrow, rocky trail that wound its way upward. The mountain loomed ahead, dark and foreboding, its peak hidden by clouds. This is it, he said, turning to the girl. She nodded, her face pale but resolute. Let's go, she said. Together, they began their climb, the silence of the mountain surrounding them. The air was thin, the climb steep, but they pressed on. As they ascended, the wind picked up, howling through the trees. It felt like the mountain was alive, watching them, waiting. They climbed for hours, the terrain growing rougher as they neared the top. Finally, they reached a clearing, and there, hidden in the rocks, was a small, unmarked door. It looked as though it had been built into the side of the mountain, hidden from view, a secret in plain sight. Jake approached the door slowly, the key to the device in his pocket. As he reached out to touch the door, a sense of dread washed over him. He turned to the girl. This is it, he said. Whatever we find behind this door will change everything. She looked at him, her eyes filled with fear, but also with something else. Determination. Let's open it, she said. Jake hesitated for a moment, his fingers gripping the cold metal handle of the door. The wind howled around them, sending shivers down his spine. The mountain seemed to press in on them, its heavy silence bearing down as if it were holding its breath, waiting. The girl stood beside him, her face a mixture of fear and determination, her eyes wide, as if trying to make sense of what they had found. She had come this far, and now there was no turning back. They both knew it. With a deep breath, Jake turned the handle and pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, echoing through the stillness of the mountain. As it opened fully, a gust of cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of damp earth and something older, something forgotten. They stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang, leaving them in total darkness. Jake fumbled for his flashlight, his hand shaking slightly as he clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow passage ahead. The walls were smooth, made of stone, their surfaces cold and damp to the touch. The air was thick, like it had been sealed off for years. "What is this place?" the girl whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake didn't answer right away. He was too busy trying to make sense of it all. They had followed the clues, the symbols, the map, and now they were here, in the heart of the mountain, standing in front of a door that had clearly been hidden for a long time. He moved forward, the girl close behind him. The passageway was long, stretching into the darkness, but the light from his flashlight revealed more with every step. As they moved deeper, Jake noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols he recognized from the journal they had found. The same symbols that had appeared on the device and the photograph. It was all connected. They were getting closer to the truth. The further they walked, the more oppressive the air became. It felt like they were intruding on something ancient, something that had been waiting for them. The feeling in the pit of Jake's stomach grew, the unease gnawing at him. But there was no turning back. They had come too far. The passage led them to a large chamber, its ceiling high and vaulted, the walls lined with more shelves and crates, many of which looked as if they hadn't been touched in decades. In the center of the room stood a massive stone structure, a pedestal that looked like it had been built to hold something important. The air around it hummed, like electricity in the air, and Jake could feel the tension building, like something was about to happen. The girl stepped forward, her eyes wide, scanning the room. This must be it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is what my father wanted me to find." Jake nodded, his gaze fixed on the pedestal. He moved closer, his flashlight illuminating something on top of the stone structure. There, resting on the pedestal, was a small, ornate box, its surface glimmering faintly. The box was old, but it was beautifully crafted, with intricate designs carved into the wood. It was the same size as the one they had found in the garage, the one with the strange key. "This is it," Jake murmured, his voice thick with realization. The girl stepped up beside him, her hand reaching out, but Jake stopped her. "Wait," he said, his voice firm. "We don't know what this is yet. We need to be careful." The girl nodded, her face pale, but her curiosity was clear. She had to know what was inside. Jake hesitated for a moment longer, then carefully reached for the box. It was heavier than he expected, its weight a reminder of how important this moment was. He set it down on the pedestal, his heart racing as he slowly opened it. The lid creaked as it lifted, and inside, there was nothing but darkness. But then, with a soft click, a light flickered to life within the box. A holographic projection appeared in the air above it, casting strange symbols and images into the room. Jake stepped back, his breath catching in his throat. The image above the box was of a map, another map, but this one was far more detailed. It showed a location deep within the mountains, far beyond where they had been. The girl's eyes widened as she saw the map. This is it," she whispered. "This is where it all began. This is where my father—" Her voice trailed off, her face clouded with both fear and recognition. Jake studied the projection, his eyes scanning the details. The map was like a blueprint, showing hidden passages, marked locations, and something more, something buried, something ancient. This was the key to everything. As the hologram flickered, the symbols began to change, shifting and rearranging themselves. Then, a final message appeared. The truth lies within. The key to the past is the key to the future. Jake looked at the girl, his mind racing. They were standing at the crossroads of something massive, something far bigger than either of them had imagined. The girl took a step forward, her hand shaking as she reached for the holographic map, as if to touch it, to claim it. "Do you think we're ready?" she asked, her voice filled with both fear and determination. Jake didn't know if they were ready, but he knew one thing for certain. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. "We have to be," he said quietly. Together, they turned toward the exit, the weight of the map and the device heavy in the air. knowing that whatever lay ahead, they were about to uncover the truth that had been hidden for generations. The map from the hologram lingered in Jake's mind as he and the girl retraced their steps out of the hidden chamber. The weight of what they had uncovered pressed down on them, each footstep echoing in the silence of the mountain as they made their way back to the truck. The wind had picked up, howling through the narrow passage, but Jake felt a strange calmness in the midst of the storm. Whatever they had found in the dark, it was far from over. They were closer to the truth now, but the truth was dangerous. The girl walked beside him, her gaze fixed ahead, as if she were searching for answers in the distance. Jake wanted to say something, anything to reassure her, but he knew there were no easy answers. She had followed him this far, and there was no turning back. The girl spoke first. "What happens when we reach the location on the map?" Her voice was steady, but there was an edge of fear beneath it. Jake glanced at her, his jaw tight. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know one thing. We can't stop now. We're too deep in this to turn around." They reached the truck, the cold air biting at their skin as they climbed inside. Jake started the engine, the truck's headlights cutting through the darkness as they drove back down the winding mountain path. The road was narrow and treacherous, but Jake's hands gripped the steering wheel with a focus that came from years of navigating danger. He wasn't about to let anything stop them now. The truck bounced over the uneven road as the girl sat quietly beside him. She hadn't spoken since the question, and Jake didn't push her. He didn't have the answers either. The further they drove, the more the mountains seemed to swallow them whole. It felt like they were being drawn into something much larger than themselves. The landscape outside grew barren, the trees thinning out, until all that was left was a vast, open plain. In the distance, a small town appeared on the horizon, but there was no warmth in it, no comfort. It felt abandoned, forgotten by time. The girl leaned forward, peering out of the window. "Is that where we're going?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Jake nodded. "It looks like it. We're close." The town grew larger as they approached, its buildings crumbling under the weight of neglect. The streets were empty, save for a few stray animals scavenging for food. It was the kind of place that had been left behind, as if the world had moved on and forgotten about it. They drove through the empty streets, the silence thick in the air. Every building they passed seemed to be decaying, as if the town had been abandoned for years. But as they reached the center of town, they found a small building standing, remarkably intact compared to the others. It was a single-story structure, with a faded sign hanging above the door. Jake pulled up to the curb and turned off the engine. The girl was already looking at him, her face a mask of nervous anticipation. "What now?" she asked, her voice shaking. Jake didn't respond immediately. He had no idea what they would find in that building, but the map had led them here. Whatever was hidden inside, they had to face it. With a deep breath, he opened the door and stepped out. The girl followed, her footsteps hesitant. They approached the door of the building, the old wood creaking beneath their feet. Jake reached for the handle and pushed it open. The door groaned as it moved, revealing a dimly lit interior. The room was sparsely furnished, with dust covering every surface. A few old tables were scattered throughout the room, along with filing cabinets and boxes filled with forgotten papers. But in the center of the room was a large desk, and behind it, a figure sat hunched over, scribbling something on a piece of paper. Jake stepped forward, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun at his side. The girl gasped softly. "You," he said. "I want the truth to be uncovered. The truth that your father tried so hard to keep hidden." Jake's mind raced. It was like the pieces were falling into place, but there was still so much he didn't understand. "What truth?" Jake demanded. The man's grin grew wider, almost maniacal. "The truth that will change everything. The truth that will make you understand why you're here. Why you're both here." The man's eyes gleamed as he slowly stood from the desk, his movements deliberate, almost as if savoring the moment. Jake felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him, a suffocating tension filling the room. The man's grin never faltered, and Jake instinctively took a step back, his hand hovering near his weapon. The girl beside him was frozen, her wide eyes locked on the stranger who had just revealed he had been watching them all along. The silence between them stretched long before the man finally spoke. "I see you're both still in the dark," he said, his voice smooth, laced with amusement. "It's almost charming, really." Jake didn't react, though his mind was racing. What did this man know? Why was he involved? The girl's voice broke the silence, her words trembling. What are you talking about? She demanded, her voice shaking but defiant. What truth? Why do you keep saying that? The man's smile deepened, and he stepped closer, his gaze flickering between the two of them. Oh, I'm sure you'll find out soon enough, he said cryptically. But you've already found your first clue, haven't you? The map, the device, the journals. They were all meant to lead you here. To me. Jake clenched his fists. Who the hell are you? He growled, his voice sharp with frustration. The man simply chuckled. Me? I'm the keeper of the past. The one who knows the truth about everything your father tried to bury. Everything he tried to keep you from finding. The girl's breath caught in her throat, her eyes wide with realization. You knew my father? She whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. The man nodded slowly, his face unreadable. I knew him better than you ever will, he said softly, his eyes cold. He was part of something much bigger than you could possibly imagine. And now, you're going to finish what he started. Jake could see the confusion in the girl's eyes, the fear that was starting to settle in. She had already been through so much, and now this stranger was talking about things that were beyond their understanding. What did he start? Jake demanded. What's all of this for? The man looked at him for a moment, as if weighing his next words. Your father was trying to stop something. He knew the power of the secret that was hidden all these years. And he knew that if it fell into the wrong hands, it would destroy everything. That's why he left the clues for you, to make sure it didn't fall into the hands of the wrong people. Jake's mind raced. And you're the wrong people? He asked, a sense of disbelief creeping into his voice. The man's expression darkened. I'm not the one who's going to destroy the world, but I'm the one who will make sure the secret is revealed. The girl's voice broke through the tension. What secret? She asked, her voice shaking but full of determination. The man's eyes flickered with something like admiration. Your father found it, he said, but he never had the courage to unlock it. The truth your father tried to protect was hidden in plain sight. And now you, my dear, are the only one who can open it. The girl's eyes widened, and she took a step back, her breath coming faster. No, she whispered. I can't. I'm not ready for this. Jake turned to her, his expression softening. You don't have to do this alone, he said gently, his hand resting on her shoulder. We'll figure this out together. She nodded slowly, though the fear in her eyes didn't fade. The man smiled, as if he had been waiting for this moment. Of course, you'll figure it out together. But it's too late for you to back out now. The truth is already on its way, and there's no stopping it. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The man's words were like a death sentence, heavy with the weight of something ancient and powerful. The man walked toward a nearby shelf, his fingers grazing the edge of a dusty book. I'm the one who's been protecting the secret all these years, he continued, turning back to face them. Your father wasn't the only one who knew about it. There were others, people who swore to keep it buried. But the time for keeping secrets is over. The man's eyes gleamed. And now, you're going to help me bring it into the light. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the man, his mind reeling. The girl was still standing beside him, her expression a mix of fear and resolve. He knew they had no choice but to confront whatever was waiting. What do you want from us? Jake asked, his voice hoarse. The man's smile widened. I want you to finish what your father started. I want you to open the door that he couldn't. And when you do, you'll understand why I've been waiting for so long. There was a long pause, and then the man's voice softened. But be warned, once you open that door, there's no going back. The truth will change everything. Jake and the girl exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. The man was right. There was no turning back now. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. With a deep breath, Jake stepped forward. Let's do it, he said firmly, his voice steady despite the uncertainty that gripped him. The girl nodded, her fear replaced by a new determination. We'll finish it. Jake and the girl walked toward the man, their steps heavy with the weight of the decision they had just made. The air in the room seemed to grow thicker with each passing second, the silence punctuated only by the sound of their footsteps on the wooden floor. The man, still seated at his desk, watched them with a calculating look, his fingers tapping lightly on the surface. He was waiting, but for what? Jake wasn't sure. The girl took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the man as she spoke. We'll open the door, she said, her voice steady but tinged with an edge of fear. But we need to know everything. No more secrets. The man's smile widened, a glint of satisfaction flashing in his eyes. Of course, he said. You deserve to know the truth. You've come this far after all. But be warned, once you unlock it, there's no going back. Jake exchanged a glance with the girl, then nodded. We're ready, he said, his voice firm, despite the unease gnawing at him. The man leaned back in his chair, his fingers still tapping rhythmically on the desk. Very well, he said. The truth, the secret your father hid, is tied to a place, a location. It's a place that no one can find unless they know what to look for. Your father was part of something much bigger than you realize, something that goes back centuries. He and others like him were tasked with guarding this place, keeping it hidden from those who would use it for their own gain. Jake listened intently, his mind racing. What is this place? He asked. The man leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. It's a sanctuary, he said. A place where something powerful is kept. Something that could change the course of history if it falls into the wrong hands. The girl looked confused. What could be so powerful? What is it? The man's eyes glinted with a mixture of excitement and fear. I can't tell you everything. But what I can tell you is that your father was the last of his kind. He was the only one who knew the full truth, the only one who could unlock the sanctuary's power. That's why he tried to protect you. He knew that you were the key. The girl stepped back, her face pale. Me? I'm the key, she whispered, disbelief written across her face. The man nodded slowly. Yes, you are the heir to a legacy that goes back centuries. Your father tried to keep you away from it, but now that you've found the map, the device, the journals, it's all leading you here. You are the one who can unlock the door to the sanctuary. Jake's mind reeled. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was all too much, too overwhelming. The girl, however, seemed to take it all in with a strange calmness. She looked at Jake, then back at the man. How do we unlock the door? She asked, her voice steady, though Jake could hear the underlying fear in her words. The man smiled, a faint trace of respect in his eyes. You already have everything you need, he said. The map, the device, the journals. They're all pieces of the puzzle. The key is to use them in the right order. Only then will you be able to access the sanctuary. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. It was clear that the man knew more than he was letting on. But there was no time to waste. They had come this far, and now they were so close. Where do we go from here? Jake asked, his voice low and tense. The man stood, moving slowly around the desk, his gaze never leaving them. You need to follow the map, he said. The location it points to is hidden deep in the mountains. It's not far from here. But be careful. There are others who are looking for the sanctuary as well. If they get there first, everything will be lost. The girl took a deep breath. And what happens if we get there first? She asked. The man's smile was dark. Then you'll unlock the sanctuary. But be prepared. The truth you find there will change everything. You will never be the same. Jake felt the weight of the man's words settle in his chest. He didn't know if they were ready for whatever awaited them, but there was no turning back now. The girl nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. We'll go, she said. Jake turned and walked toward the door, the girl following close behind. The man's voice stopped them just as they reached the threshold. One last thing, he said. If you don't succeed, there's no coming back. You'll have unleashed something that cannot be contained. So make sure you're prepared for what you're about to face. Jake glanced at the girl. They were both in this together. No matter what awaited them, they would face it head on. We're ready, Jake said, his voice steady, his determination firm. The girl nodded, her eyes flashing with the same resolve. They stepped out of the building, the cold air hitting them as they made their way back to the truck. The journey ahead would be the hardest one they had ever faced, but they couldn't turn back. The key to the sanctuary was in their hands, and they were about to unlock the greatest secret of all. Jake and the girl drove through the desolate streets, the truck's headlights cutting through the thick night as they followed the map's final destination. The man's ominous warning about others seeking the sanctuary echoed in Jake's mind. They had to get there first, but the weight of the unknown hung heavily in the air. The journey had taken them this far, but now they were stepping into uncharted territory, both literally and figuratively. The road ahead became more rugged, winding through dense forests and steep terrain. The truck bounced over the rough path, the tires gripping the uneven ground as the mountain loomed closer. They could feel the temperature dropping, the night growing colder with each passing mile. The girl sat silently beside Jake, her face pale, her eyes distant. She had been quiet for some time, lost in her own thoughts, but Jake could feel the fear simmering just below the surface. He didn't blame her. They were about to uncover a truth that could change everything. The closer they got to the mountain, the more intense the feeling of urgency became. There was something about this place, something that had been waiting for them for years. The truck crested a hill, and Jake saw it. There, nestled in the trees at the base of the mountain, was a hidden clearing. The clearing was surrounded by thick brush, almost as if it had been deliberately kept from view. Jake parked the truck at the edge, turning off the engine. He looked over at the girl. "We're here," he said, his voice steady but filled with anticipation. She nodded, but there was a nervousness in her eyes. "This is it," she whispered. Jake opened the door and stepped out, the cold air hitting him like a slap in the face. He looked around, scanning the area. The clearing was quiet, too quiet. The trees surrounding it were dense, blocking out most of the moonlight. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They moved cautiously, the silence around them oppressive. Every step felt heavier, as if the weight of the past was bearing down on them. The girl's breath came in shallow gasps as they made their way through the clearing. Jake's flashlight flickered in the darkness, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and move. The ground beneath them was uneven, the earth soft and damp. He could feel his pulse quicken as they approached the heart of the clearing. In the center was a large stone structure, half covered in moss and vines. It was ancient, but its design was unmistakable. This was the place, the sanctuary. The air around it felt different, charged with energy. Jake reached out and placed his hand on the stone. It was cool to the touch, almost unnaturally so, as if it had been untouched for centuries. The girl stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the structure. "Is this it?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jake nodded, his fingers still resting on the stone. "This is where it all started," he said quietly. "The place your father tried to protect." She glanced at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But what's inside? What are we going to find?" Jake didn't have the answer. All he knew was that they had to open it, that they had to finish what her father had started. He moved to the front of the stone structure, where a large, intricate symbol was carved into the surface. It was the same symbol that had appeared on the map, the device, and the journal. The symbol seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. Jake ran his fingers over it, and as he did, the stone began to rumble. The ground beneath their feet vibrated slightly, and the stone began to shift. Slowly, the massive stone door began to open, revealing a dark passageway beyond. The girl stepped back, her hand gripping Jake's arm. "What's in there?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The truth," Jake said, his voice low and steady. "We're about to find out." He stepped forward, leading the way into the passage. The air inside was damp and cold, the walls slick with moisture. The passageway was narrow, barely wide enough for them to walk side by side. The stone walls seemed to close in around them, the flickering light from their flashlights barely illuminating the way ahead. They moved deeper into the passage, the silence almost deafening. The only sound was the echo of their footsteps, the soft scuff of shoes on stone. As they rounded a bend, the passage opened up into a large chamber, its high ceiling disappearing into darkness. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it, a large, intricately carved chest. The chest was made of dark wood, its surface adorned with symbols that seemed to glow in the dim light. Jake approached it slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. The girl followed closely behind, her eyes fixed on the chest. "Is this it?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jake nodded, his hand reaching for the lid of the chest. As he touched it, the symbols on the chest seemed to pulse, and the air around them grew heavier, charged with anticipation. With a deep breath, Jake lifted the lid. Inside was a small, ornate box, no bigger than a shoebox, but it radiated a sense of power, a feeling of something ancient and untold. The girl gasped as she looked at it. "This is it," she whispered. "This is what my father was protecting." Jake picked up the box carefully, his fingers brushing the smooth surface. As he held it, he felt a surge of energy, a connection to something far greater than he could understand. The girl stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "What now?" she asked. Jake didn't know. But one thing was clear, whatever was inside this box would change everything. He looked at her, his voice steady. "Now we open it." Jake's fingers hovered over the small box, the weight of what they had uncovered pressing heavily on his chest. The girl stood beside him, her breath shallow, her eyes fixed on the mysterious box that had been hidden away for so long. This was it, the moment they had been working toward. The last piece of the puzzle. He could feel the pulse of energy radiating from the box, the air around them thick with anticipation. The girl reached out, her fingers brushing the edges of the box, but Jake stopped her with a gentle touch. "Let me do it," he said, his voice steady, despite the pounding in his chest. She nodded, her face pale but resolute, stepping back slightly. Jake took a deep breath and slowly lifted the lid. Inside was a small, intricately carved stone, no bigger than his palm. It shimmered faintly in the dim light, as though it were alive, almost glowing. He picked it up carefully, feeling the weight of it in his hand. It was smooth, yet cold, and the markings etched into its surface were familiar, the same symbols they had seen on the map, the journals, the device. This was the key, the final piece. As Jake held it, the stone seemed to hum, almost as if it was reacting to his touch. The room around them seemed to shift, the air growing thicker. The girl gasped, stepping closer, her eyes wide with realization. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling with awe. Jake didn't answer right away. He could feel it, the connection, the stone, the symbols, the sanctuary. It was all coming together, but what was its true purpose? He didn't know yet, but he had to find out. Without thinking, he held the stone in front of him, just as he had seen it done in the holographic projection. The symbols on the stone began to glow brighter, and suddenly, the room around them was filled with a low, resonating hum. The ground beneath their feet vibrated, and the stone in Jake's hand pulsed with an intensity that made his heart race. Then, without warning, the walls of the chamber began to shift. The stone beneath their feet cracked, and the floor gave way, revealing a hidden path that led deeper into the earth. The girl stumbled back, clutching Jake's arm for support. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice filled with fear. Jake didn't have time to answer. The path was opening up, and they had no choice but to follow it. He pulled her gently, guiding her forward as the ground beneath them trembled. The stone pathway stretched out before them, lit only by the faint glow from the stone in Jake's hand. The air grew colder with each step, and the silence around them was deafening. It felt as though they were walking into the heart of the mountain itself, and Jake could feel the weight of the past bearing down on him. As they walked, the symbols on the stone began to change, shifting and rearranging themselves, as though the stone was trying to communicate. The girl looked at him, her face filled with questions, but Jake didn't have the answers. He had no idea what this place was, what secrets it held, but they were getting closer to the truth with each step. Finally, the path opened up into a vast cavern. The walls of the cavern were lined with ancient carvings, their meaning lost to time. In the center of the cavern stood a massive stone door, its surface etched with the same symbols that had appeared on the stone. Jake stepped forward, feeling the pull of the door, the weight of its significance. This was it, the final threshold. The girl stepped beside him, her hand reaching for the stone. "Is this the door?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded. "This is it," he said, his voice steady but filled with awe. "This is what we've been looking for." He raised the stone, holding it in front of the door. The symbols on the stone began to glow brighter, and the door slowly creaked open. As it did, a wave of cold air rushed out, filling the cavern with a chill that made their breath visible. The girl shivered, but Jake didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest as the door fully opened to reveal what lay beyond. The room inside was vast, its high ceiling lost in shadow. At the center of the room was a large, ornate pedestal, and on it rested something that took Jake's breath away. It was a book, but not like any book he had ever seen. The cover was made of dark metal, its surface engraved with more of the symbols they had been following. The book seemed to pulse with energy, as if it were alive, waiting for them to approach. The girl stepped forward, her eyes wide with awe. "What is it?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Jake didn't know how to answer, but he knew that whatever this was, it was the heart of the secret they had been chasing. He reached out, his fingers trembling as he touched the book. The moment his hand made contact, the room seemed to shift again. The air thickened, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The book opened by itself, its pages flipping as though an invisible force was turning them. Then, the words on the pages began to glow, and Jake could hear them in his mind. A voice, ancient and powerful, whispered to him, filling his thoughts. You are the one who will unlock the future. The key lies within. The past has been set in motion. The truth is now yours to discover. Jake's heart raced as he looked at the girl, his thoughts spinning. The book, the stone, the symbols, it was all part of something much larger than they had ever imagined. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. They were standing on the brink of something that would change everything. The moment Jake touched the pages of the book, a rush of energy surged through him, almost knocking the breath out of his lungs. The room seemed to shift again, the shadows deepening and swirling as if the very walls were alive. The girl stepped back, her eyes wide with fear and awe. The voice that had filled Jake's mind earlier grew louder, now clear and unmistakable. The key lies within. The truth is yours to unlock. But remember, with knowledge comes responsibility. What you do next will shape the future of everything. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as the words echoed in his mind. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, the burden of what they had uncovered becoming heavier with every passing second. He looked at the girl, who was still frozen, staring at the book. Do you hear it? He asked, his voice trembling. The girl nodded, her lips parting in disbelief. It's telling us something. What does it mean? Jake didn't know how to answer. The book was alive with energy, the words on its pages glowing brighter, as though they were waiting for him to take the next step. He could feel the power of the knowledge, but with it came a gnawing fear. What would happen if they opened it fully? The voice spoke again, this time more insistent, more urgent. You must choose. The past has already been set in motion. The future can still be altered. Do you have the courage to face what lies ahead? Jake's grip tightened on the book, the weight of the decision pressing on his shoulders. The girl's voice broke through his thoughts. We have to know the truth, Jake. We can't stop now. We came this far. She stepped closer, her eyes filled with the same determination he felt in his chest. She was right. They couldn't turn back now. With a deep breath, Jake turned the page, and as he did, the room seemed to shift once more, the air thickening, the ground trembling beneath them. The book glowed brighter, the pages flipping faster, faster than they could follow. Then, suddenly, the glowing stopped. The room went deathly still. The voice that had filled Jake's mind was silent. In front of them, the air shimmered and rippled like a mirage, and as it did, an image began to form. It was a scene, like a vision from another time. The image of a vast, ancient city appeared in the air before them, its streets filled with people, its buildings towering, the city alive with activity. Jake could feel the weight of history in the air, the past unfolding before their eyes. The voice returned, softer this time, almost like a whisper. This was the beginning. The city was built on the secret that you now hold. It is the heart of everything, the source of all power. Your father tried to protect it, but the truth cannot remain hidden forever. The girl reached out, her fingers brushing the air, as if trying to touch the vision before them. This is where it all started, she whispered, her voice filled with awe. The city, the secret, Jake nodded, his mind racing with the implications. The city, the secret, it was all connected, and they were at the center of it. But what did it mean for the future? What were they supposed to do with this knowledge? The vision began to fade, the image of the city blurring as the air rippled again. The book closed with a soft snap, its energy dissipating as if it had fulfilled its purpose. Jake stood there for a long moment, staring at the book, his mind struggling to process everything that had just happened. The girl stood beside him, her face pale, her expression a mix of wonder and confusion. What now? She asked, her voice quiet. Jake took a deep breath, his thoughts racing. We have the truth now, he said slowly. The secret is out, but we can't let it fall into the wrong hands. We have to protect it. We have to make sure it doesn't destroy everything. The girl nodded, her expression hardening. But what if we're not ready for this? She asked. Jake looked at her, his face grim. We don't have a choice. The past has led us here, and the future depends on what we do next. He turned toward the door of the cavern, the weight of the truth heavy on his shoulders. The journey had brought them here, but the hardest part was still ahead. They had uncovered a secret that could change the world, but with that knowledge came a responsibility that neither of them had expected. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were the keepers of this secret now. Together, they had to decide what to do with it. The girl followed him, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the cavern. The air was thick with tension, the uncertainty of what lay ahead pressing down on them. But Jake didn't hesitate. He knew they couldn't keep walking in the shadows. They had to face the truth, no matter the cost. As they stepped outside into the cold night air, the wind howled around them, the mountain towering in the distance. The world was changing, and they were at the center of it all. The future had been set in motion, and now, they had to decide how to shape it. With the knowledge they carried, they held the power to alter the course of everything. The weight of that knowledge was heavy, but Jake knew they had no choice but to move forward. Whatever came next, they would face it together. In this thrilling continuation of Hell Angels stories, follow the intense journey of a Hells Angels biker and a young girl as they uncover dark secrets hidden in plain sight. As they unravel a mystery left behind by the girl's father, they discover ancient clues, symbols, and powerful forces that could change the course of history. Their search leads them to a long-forgotten sanctuary deep in the mountains, where the truth that could alter everything lies within. With each step, the stakes grow higher as they uncover deeper layers of the Hell Angel stories, unveiling secrets that were meant to stay hidden. The thrilling tale of trust, danger, and secrets unfolds as they reach the heart of the mystery, where the ultimate choice awaits. Their fate rests on the decisions they make, and the Hell Angels stories they are now part of will forever change their lives. The journey isn't over yet, as they step into the unknown to face the consequences of their discovery and protect the truth from falling into the wrong hands.